The story of the ghost bride on the haunted bridge. In the small town of San Miguel de las Sombras, tucked away among the Rocky Mountains of Oaxaca, Mexico, time seems to move more slowly. The cobblestone streets are filled with the aroma of mole wafting from simple kitchens, and the sound of ancient church bells echoes each evening. In the center of town, an ancient stone bridge called Puente de las Lágrimas, the Bridge of Tears, stands as a silent witness to a dark history that is still whispered in stories told at night. The Esmeralda River that flows beneath it sparkles beautifully during the day, but when night falls, its waters seem to hold secrets that have never been spoken. Elena Morales, a 24-year-old girl with long black hair and inquisitive brown eyes, is the proud daughter of San Miguel. She works as a local guide, taking tourists to historic sites while telling legends that send shivers down your spine. Elena has a special talent. She can bring folk tales to life with her soft yet passionate voice. However, there is one story she always avoids telling: the story of La Novia del Puente, the ghost bride who haunts the Puente de las Lágrimas. "Don't ask about that bridge," she told a group of tourists from Mexico City one afternoon, smiling stiffly. There are more interesting stories in the old church, but her eyes couldn't hide the fear that lurked behind her smile. Elena lived with her grandmother, Dona Rosa, a Curandere local healer known for her potions and ability to talk to spirits. Dona Rosa was a small woman with a face full of wrinkles, but her eyes shone with immeasurable wisdom. In her modest home, the walls were covered with candles and holy images, and every night Dona Rosa prayed fervently, as if to protect the house from something invisible. Elena, Mija, never dismiss old stories, Dona Rosa said one night, stirring manzanilla tea in the kitchen. La Novia is not just a legend. She's still here, searching for something lost. Elena nodded, unwilling to argue. To her, the story of Isabella, the bride who killed herself on the bridge after her lover was murdered, was just a fairy tale to frighten children. But deep down, she couldn't deny the strange feeling that came over her every time she passed the Puente de las Lágrimas. There was a faint whisper in the air, like a song carried by the wind, that made her heart beat faster. Besides Elena and Dona Rosa, there was Mateo Vargas, Elena's childhood friend. Mateo, 26, was a local musician with a charming smile and an old guitar that was never far from his hands. He often performed in the town square, singing ranchera songs that touched the hearts of his audience. Mateo was the kind of person who never took anything seriously, including local legends. "If La Novia really exists, I'll ask her to dance," he joked one day, causing Elena to roll her eyes. But there was another person who had recently arrived in San Miguel, someone who would change everything. Javier Castillo, a 30-year-old journalist from Mexico City, came to this small town to write an article about Mexico's supernatural tourism. With a camera around his neck and a notebook full of scribbles, Javier was a skeptical but curious man. He had heard about the Puente de las Lágrimas from a colleague and decided that this legend could be his next big story. One sunny afternoon, Elena was leading a tour near the town square when Javier approached her. "Señorita, I hear you're the best person to tell the story of the haunted bridge," he said with a confident smile. Elena looked at him suspiciously, but there was something in Javier's eyes, a mixture of enthusiasm and sincerity, that made it hard to refuse. "It's just an old story," Elena replied, trying to sound indifferent. "Nothing special." "Oh, I'm sure there's more to it," Javier replied, his eyes sparkling. "And I want you to tell it." As the sun set and the shadows lengthened across the Puente de las Lágrimas, the wind carried the faint scent of marigolds. In the distance, a faint song could be heard, so faint it was almost inaudible. Elena felt a shiver run down her spine, though she wasn't sure why. That night, without her realizing it, was the beginning of something that would shake her life and reveal a secret that had been buried in this old bridge for centuries. The sky over San Miguel de las Sombras was a deep orange as the sun set behind the mountains of Oaxaca. Elena Morales walked quickly toward the town square, her cloth bag swinging from her shoulder. Her mind was still filled with her afternoon conversation with Javier Castillo, a journalist from Mexico City who seemed overly enthusiastic about the legend of the Puente de las Lágrimas. Why does he insist on this story? Elena muttered to herself, ignoring the uneasy feeling that was beginning to gnaw at her. That night, Elena had promised to meet Mateo Vargas at Senora Lucia's little cafe, her favorite place to chat over chocolate caliente. Mateo was already sitting in the corner, his guitar leaning against the wall, and his face lit up when he saw Elena enter. "You're late, princessa," he teased, pushing his cup of hot chocolate toward Elena. "Busy with charming tourists?" Elena smiled faintly, but her mind was elsewhere. "There was a strange journalist earlier," she said, stirring her drink. "He wanted to know about La Novia del Puente. I told him it was just a fairy tale, but he didn't believe me." Mateo laughed. Let him waste his time. If the ghost of that bride really existed, she would have shown up at our karaoke night. But Mateo's laughter faded when he saw Elena's expression. "What's wrong? You look serious." Elena hesitated for a moment, then told him about the strange whispers she heard every time she passed the Puente de las Lágrimas. "Maybe it's just the wind," she said, trying to convince herself. "But it feels like someone is calling me." Mateo raised an eyebrow, but before he could respond, the cafe door swung open with a loud creak. Javier entered, a notebook and camera still hanging from his neck. He went straight to their table, ignoring Mateo's suspicious looks. "Elena, I need your help," he said without further ado. "I want to go to the bridge tonight. It's a full moon, right? They say it's the best time to see something." Elena looked at him in shock. "Tonight? No way. That's no time to be fooling around, Senor Castillo. Just call me Javier," he replied with a slightly overconfident smile. "Come on, Elena. You know the story. If it's just a fairy tale, what's the harm? I just need a guide." Mateo interrupted, his tone sharp. "If you're looking for thrills, look elsewhere. This bridge is not a playground." But there was something in Javier's eyes, a mixture of determination and almost obsessive curiosity, that made Elena hesitate to refuse. Maybe, she thought, going to the bridge and proving there was nothing there would put an end to this commotion. "All right," she said finally, ignoring Mateo's disapproving look. "But just for a moment. And you're coming too, Mateo." Mateo complained, but he knew that Elena wouldn't change her mind. Reluctantly, he nodded. The three of them left the cafe and walked toward the Puente de las Lágrimas under a sky that had grown dark by now, lit only by a perfectly round full moon. When they reached the bridge, the air felt colder than usual. The Esmeralda River below them flowed with a strange, whispering sound. Javier was busy setting up his camera, while Mateo stood close to Elena, his hand ready to grab his friend's arm if anything happened. Elena tried to remain calm, but her heart was racing. "Hurry, Javier," she said, her voice shaking slightly. Javier pointed his camera at the middle of the bridge, where the old stones looked more worn. "They say La Novia appears here," he said, almost to himself. Suddenly, a strong wind blew, carrying the strong scent of marigolds. Elena froze. She had smelled the scent before, but never so strongly. Then they heard it, a soft song, like a woman's voice carried on the wind. The lyrics were in ancient Spanish, so gentle yet piercing to the bone. Javier turned quickly, his camera shaking in his hands. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. Before Elena could answer, the streetlight near the bridge flickered, then went out completely. In the darkness, a shadowy figure appeared at the end of the bridge, a woman in a tattered white dress, her veil fluttering even though the wind had stopped. Mateo grabbed Elena's arm, his voice shaking. "Elena, we have to go. Now." But Elena couldn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the figure, and for a moment she felt as if it was staring directly into her soul. The chanting grew louder and the unfamiliar words sounded like a call. Without realizing it, Elena took a step forward, as if drawn by a force she couldn't resist. "Elena!" Mateo yelled, pulling her back. Javier, still holding the camera, jerked suddenly as the screen showed something they couldn't see with the naked eye. A pale face behind a veil, with empty eyes staring straight at them. The commotion snapped Elena out of her trance. She came to, breathing hard. "We have to go," she said, finally agreeing with Mateo. The three of them ran from the bridge, their hearts pounding as the singing slowly faded behind them. When they reached the plaza, safe from the bridge, Javier checked his camera with shaking hands. The shot was still there, the singing, the shadow of the white dress, and that terrifying face. This is real," he murmured, his voice filled with a mixture of triumph and fear. Elena stared at the bridge, now shrouded in darkness. She knew tonight had changed everything. La Novia del Puente was no longer just a story, and for some reason, Elena felt that the ghost was calling her personally, and she wasn't sure she could escape its call. The morning in San Miguel de las Sombras was grayer than usual. A thin fog enveloped the town, and the smell of wet earth mixed with marigolds from who knew where. Elena Morales sat at her grandmother Dona Rosa's kitchen table, staring at a cup of cold manzanilla tea. Her mind was still filled with images from the previous night at the Puente de las Lágrimas, the hooded woman, the haunting song, and the pale face captured by Javier Castillo's camera. She wanted to believe it was just an illusion, but the cold shivers running down her spine told her otherwise. Dona Rosa entered the kitchen, her steps slow but purposeful. She looked at Elena with worried eyes. "Mija, you went to the bridge last night, didn't you?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. Elena froze. She hadn't told her grandmother anything, but Dona Rosa always had a way of knowing. I was just escorting some tourists," Elena replied, avoiding her grandmother's gaze. "Nothing happened." Dona Rosa slowly shook her head. "Don't lie to me, Elena. La Novia didn't come without a reason. She called someone, and I'm afraid it was you." She went to a wooden shelf in the corner of the room and took out an old box decorated with floral carvings. From inside, she took out a silver necklace with a small heart-shaped pendant that looked worn but had a strange glow to it. "Wear this," she said, handing her the necklace. "It will protect you." Elena wanted to protest, but there was something in her grandmother's tone that made her obey. She hung the necklace around her neck and felt the cold metal touch her skin. "Grandmother, why are you so sure of this story? What do you know of La Novia?" Dona Rosa was silent for a moment, then said, "Our family has a connection to this bridge, Elena, but now is not the time for that story. What is important is that you stay away from that place." But there was no time for Elena to stay away. That morning, Javier appeared in front of her house, his face full of enthusiasm despite the dark circles under his eyes. "Elena, you have to see this," he said, holding his small laptop. He played the recording from the previous night, zooming in on the frame where the woman's face appeared. "Look at the pendant around her neck," Javier said, pointing to the screen. Around the ghostly figure's neck was a pendant identical to the one Elena was wearing. Elena felt her breath catch. She touched the pendant around her neck, her heart pounding. "This can't be," she muttered. "I found something else," Javier continued, opening his notebook. "I went to the town library this morning. There was an old document about Isabella Cortez, the woman who became La Novia. She wasn't just the victim of a tragic love affair. Apparently, her family was involved in an ancient ritual to protect San Miguel from evil spirits. But the ritual failed, and Isabella became something else." Elena wanted to deny it all, but the pendant around her neck felt heavier. Before she could answer, Mateo arrived, his face filled with concern. "Elena, I heard you were still talking to that journalist," he said, looking suspiciously at Javier. "Are you okay? Last night, it wasn't normal." "I'm fine," Elena replied, though her voice sounded unconvincing. "But I need to know more. Javier, what else have you found out?" Javier hesitated for a moment, then said, "There's an old house on the outskirts of town, the former residence of the Cortez family. They say there are clues about what happened to Isabella. I want to go there. Will you come with me?" Mateo interrupted immediately. "No, Elena, this is going too far. You heard your grandmother. Stay away from all of this." But Elena felt a strange urge inside her, like a call she couldn't ignore. "I need to know, Mateo," she said quietly. If this has something to do with my family, I can't run away. Reluctantly, Mateo agreed to go, mostly because he didn't want Elena to go alone with Javier. The three of them went to the old Cortez house, a dilapidated building hidden behind thick trees. The walls were covered with moss and the windows were broken, but there was a strange aura that made the hairs on the back of their necks stand up. Inside, they found a dusty room with old furniture. In the corner was a table with an open old book filled with handwritten notes in Old Spanish. Javier began to read, his voice shaking. These are the notes of Isabella's father, Don Rafael. He wrote of a great mistake, a ritual that bound Isabella's soul to the bridge to hold back the evil spirit. But the spirit is now trapped with her, and they are thirsty for life. Suddenly, the ground creaked loudly, though there was no wind. The scent of marigolds filled the air again, and a faint singing voice could be heard from the stairs leading to the attic. Without thinking, Elena stepped towards the sound and the pendant around her neck began to heat up. Mateo tried to stop her, but Javier, fascinated by the mystery, followed. In the attic, they found an old mirror with a carved wooden frame. On its surface appeared the faint shadow of Isabella, her face pale but beautiful, her eyes filled with sorrow. "Ayadame," she whispered, her voice echoing in Elena's head. "Liberame." Elena stumbled backwards, almost falling. Mateo pulled her out of the attic, while Javier panicked and snapped pictures of the mirror. As they ran out of the house, the singing followed them, getting louder, as if following them. Outside, Elena noticed that her pendant was now emitting a faint glow, and for the first time, she felt that she wasn't just a part of the story, she was the key. As they returned to the city that night, Elena knew there was no turning back. La Novia del Puente had chosen her, and the secret of her family that Dona Rosa had kept hidden all these years was beginning to unravel. One big question haunted her now. What was the connection between the pendant and Isabella, and why did Elena feel that her own soul was tied to the old bridge? A light rain began to fall in San Miguel de las Sombras, shrouding the town in a suffocating gray. Elena Morales sat on the porch of her grandmother's house, Dona Rosa, staring at the silver pendant in her hand. The faint light that had emanated from the pendant the night before in the old Cortez house had faded, but its weight felt heavier than mere metal. The events in the attic, Isabella's shadow in the mirror, the whispers begging for help, still haunted her thoughts. Elena knew she could no longer dismiss the legend of La Novia del Puente as a fairy tale, but she wasn't ready to face what awaited her. That morning, Dona Rosa finally decided to speak. With a heavy voice, she led Elena into a small room at the back of the house where she kept her ritual items. There, among candles and dried herbs, Dona Rosa opened an old wooden chest. Inside were fragile documents and a small painting of Isabella Cortez, her face eerily similar to Elena's. "Our family is a direct descendant of Don Rafael, Isabella's father," Dona Rosa said, her eyes filled with regret. "This pendant belonged to her. It was part of the ritual that bound her soul to the Puente de las Lágrimas." Elena felt the world spin around her. "So I'm connected to Isabella? Why didn't you tell me from the beginning?" she asked, her voice a mixture of anger and fear. "I wanted to protect you, Mija," Dona Rosa replied. "The ritual was supposed to protect San Miguel from the evil spirits trapped in the river, but Don Rafael was wrong. He sacrificed Isabella, and now the curse binds our descendants. The pendant is the key, but it's also dangerous. The closer you get to the bridge, the stronger La Novia will call to you." Meanwhile, in a small inn in the center of town, Javier Castillo studied his notes. The mirrored photograph of the old Cortez house showed more than Isabella's face. In the background was a strange symbol he had found in the library documents. A circle with 3 curved lines, an ancient symbol associated with the Aztec water god, Calcayatlicu. Javier began to suspect that the evil spirit mentioned in Don Rafael's notes was not just a myth, but an ancient entity far more dangerous. He wanted to return to the bridge to find more clues, but he knew he needed Elena and her pendant. Mateo Vargas, growing increasingly concerned about the situation, visited Elena at her home that afternoon. "Elena," "This is insane," he said, his voice filled with frustration. "You don't need to get involved with this journalist or your grandmother's story. We can leave this town, leave all this behind." "But I can't run away, Mateo," Elena replied, her voice firm despite the doubt in her eyes. "If what the grandmother said is true, this curse is in my blood. I need to know what happened to Isabella and how to stop it." Mateo sighed, knowing that he couldn't change Elena's mind. "If you go back to the bridge, I'll go with you. I won't let you go alone with Javier." That night, despite the pouring rain, Elena, Mateo, and Javier returned to the Puente de las Lágrimas. Javier carried a flashlight and a waterproof camera, while Elena clutched the pendant, hoping it would really protect her. Mateo, with his guitar on his back as usual, walked behind, alert to every sound. By the time they reached the bridge, the rain had made the old stones slippery and shimmering in the moonlight filtering through the clouds. Javier pointed to the center of the bridge, where the faint carving of the symbol of Calcayatlicu could be seen on one of the stones. "This is no coincidence," he said. "This bridge was built over an ancient sacred site. That's probably why Isabella's spirit is trapped here." Suddenly, the pendant in Elena's hand began to heat up again, and the soft chanting returned, this time clearer. "Eidame, liberame." Elena felt her head spin, and for a moment she saw a flash of vision. Isabella standing on the bridge, her hands reaching for the wounded Diego, while the river below turned into a terrifying black vortex. "Elena, are you okay?" Mateo asked as he held her shoulders. But before Elena could answer, the river water beneath the bridge began to churn, as if something was moving in it. Javier pointed his camera at the water, and on the screen he saw a dark, non-human shadow with eyes that shone like black pearls. That's not Isabella," Javier murmured, his voice shaking. "This is what they tried to lock away." Suddenly, the wind howled, and Isabella's figure appeared in the middle of the bridge, her white dress soaked and her veil fluttering wildly. But this time she wasn't just singing. She pointed at Elena and her voice echoed in their heads. "Offspring, free me, or she will take everything." Elena fell to her knees, the pendant in her hand now glowing brightly, burning her skin. Mateo tried to pull her away, but Javier, frozen by the sight, approached Isabella instead, his camera still recording. "Wait, we can help," he shouted, but his voice was drowned out by the roar of the river, which was now rising and almost touching the edge of the bridge. Amid the chaos, Elena heard Dona Rosa's voice in her mind, her grandmother's words about the pendant being the key. With trembling hands, she lifted the pendant, and its light formed a circle in the air, causing Isabella to step back with a look of hope. But at the same time, dark shadows from the river began to crawl up the bridge, and a terrible laughter echoed not from Isabella, but from another, far more evil entity. That night, Elena realized she wasn't just facing Isabella's ghost, but something far older and more dangerous. The choice she made now would determine her fate, and perhaps the fate of all of San Miguel. The rain had stopped in San Miguel de las Sombras, but the air still felt heavy, as if it held secrets yet to be revealed. Elena Morales sat in her room, the silver pendant in her hand now feeling like a burden she couldn't shake. The events of the night before at the Puente de las Lágrimas, Isabella's pleading figure, the dark shadows from the river, and the terrifying laughter that shook her soul made it difficult for her to sleep. She knew she had gone too far, and now she was caught between two worlds, the real world and the spirit world, thirsting for freedom or destruction. That morning, Elena decided to confront Dona Rosa. She found her grandmother in the ritual room, lighting candles in front of a small statue of the Virgin of Guadalupe. "Grandmother, I need to know everything," Elena said, her voice firm despite her shaking hands. "What was in the river, and what is my connection to all of this?" Dona Rosa looked at her for a long time, then sighed. "Mija, what you saw was not just an evil spirit. It was Tlalocan, the shadow of an ancient water god that our ancestors worshipped before the new religion came. Don Rafael tried to bind him with a ritual, using Isabella's soul to seal the gate. But the ritual was wrong, and now Tlalocan wants to be free, he needs the blood of the descendants of Cortez to open the gate. That means you. Elena felt her chest tighten. So I'm the next victim? She asked, her voice almost breaking. Not if we can free Isabella first, Dona Rosa replied. The pendant is the key to breaking the bond, but it's dangerous. If you fail, Tlalocan will take your soul, and San Miguel will perish. Meanwhile, back at the inn, Javier Castillo became increasingly obsessed. He spent the night analyzing the recordings from the bridge, discovering that the laughter was not just sound, but a low-frequency vibration that made him nauseous every time he heard it. He also found another ancient note in the library about a curandero who had once tried to stop the Tlalocan with sacred songs, but had failed and disappeared without a trace. Javier was certain that Elena was the key, but he began to doubt whether he wanted to save the city or just chase the biggest story of his career. Mateo Vargas, now feeling increasingly marginalized, met Elena in the plaza that afternoon. Elena, I know you feel this is your responsibility, he said, his eyes filled with concern. But I don't believe in spirits or gods. All I know is that you're in danger and this journalist is just using you. Elena looked at Mateo with a torn heart. She knew he only wanted to protect her, but she also felt a strange urge to return to the bridge, as if Isabella was calling her in a dream. Mateo, I can't stop now, she said quietly. I feel that I have to do this, for Isabella, for my family. Mateo took Elena's hand, his voice soft but firm. If you leave again, I'll go with you. I won't lose you. That night, against Dona Rosa's advice, Elena decided to return to the Puente de las Lágrimas. She brought the amulet and a small book that her grandmother had given her, which contained sacred songs that were said to calm the spirits. Javier, who knew of her plan, insisted on coming along, bringing a recording device and a copy of the Calcayatlacu symbol, which he believed could help. Mateo, though reluctant, joined them to protect Elena. On the bridge, the atmosphere was more ominous than before. Thick fog shrouded the ancient stones, and the Esmeralda River flowed with a louder sound, like a faint roar. Elena began to sing the song from Dona Rosa's book, her voice trembling but determined. The pendant around her neck began to glow, and for a moment the figure of Isabella appeared, her face filled with hope. Canta liberame, she whispered, but Elena's singing was interrupted by a violent tremor from the river. The water began to rise, forming an unnatural swirl, and the dark shadow of Tlalocan appeared, clearer this time, an amorphous figure with glowing black eyes and clawed hands crawling toward the bridge. Javier, who had been trying to record, suddenly staggered, feeling as if he had been hit on the head. This is no ordinary ghost, he shouted, his voice panicked. Mateo pulled Elena back, but she refused. I have to finish the song, she said, her voice nearly drowned out by the roar of the water. She continued, and the light from the pendant grew brighter, forming a thin shield around them. Isabella moved closer, her hand outstretched as if to touch Elena. But at that moment, Tlalocan let out a roar that shook the bridge, and a black claw broke through the shield and scratched Elena's arm. Elena screamed, her blood dripping onto the bridge stones. Instantly, the whirlpool in the river grew wild, and Tlalocan's laughter echoed, triumphant. Isabella screamed in despair, her figure fading, the light from the pendant dimming. Mateo, in a panic, lifted Elena and ran off the bridge, followed by Javier, who nearly lost his camera. When they reached the edge of town, Elena fainted, the wound on her arm looking unnatural black and cold, as if infected by something not of this world. Mateo carried her to the house of Dona Rosa, who immediately knelt beside her granddaughter, her face pale. Her blood has been spilled, Dona Rosa murmured, her eyes filled with fear. Tlalocan is getting stronger now. We don't have much time. Javier, feeling guilty but still drawn to the mystery, said, We must try again. The song almost worked. We can save Isabella and Elena. But Mateo glared at him angrily. Enough, Javier. This isn't your game. Elena is almost dead. In the midst of their argument, Elena came to, her breath weak. Saw it, she whispered. Isabella showed me. There is a way to stop this, but I must go back. To the bridge. Dona Rosa shook her head, tears streaming down her face. Mija, if you go back, you may never come back. Elena looked at her grandmother, then at Mateo, then at Javier. I have no choice, she said, her voice full of determination despite her weakness. This isn't just about me. It's about San Miguel and Isabella. That night, Elena prepared for a greater battle, knowing that every step she took toward the bridge brought her closer to a destiny written centuries ago, and perhaps to the end of her life. The sky over San Miguel de las Sombras was shrouded in dark clouds, as if nature itself sensed the tension enveloping the small town. Elena Morales awoke in the simple bed in her grandmother's house, the black wound on her arm now feeling like a burning ember. Dona Rosa had tended to her all night with herbs and prayers, but her grandmother's face was filled with doubt. Tlalocan has smelled your blood, Mija, she said, her voice shaking. If you return to the bridge, there may be no turning back. Elena stared at the silver pendant now around her neck. The metal felt heavier than before. The vision of Isabella, a blurred image of a woman pleading and performing an ancient ritual, was still etched in her mind. I have to try, grandmother, she said, though her voice was weak. Isabella showed me the way. I must break this curse, for her, and for all of us. In a corner of the city, Mateo Vargas sat in the plaza, his guitar lying untouched beside him. His mind was in turmoil, torn between anger at Javier Castillo for putting Elena in danger and fear of losing his friend. He wanted to force Elena to put all this behind her, but he knew her resolve was stronger than anything. As he looked at the Puente de las Lágrimas in the distance, he felt a strange vibration, like a call that wasn't meant for him. In his room at the inn, Javier was busy preparing his plan. He had studied the notes on the sacred song and the symbols of Calcayatlicu and concluded that the ritual to free Isabella must be performed on the bridge at the peak of the full moon, which was only 2 nights away. However, he began to have doubts. The Tlalocan footage on his camera showed something more than ghosts. The entity seemed alive, intelligent, and hungry. What am I doing? He muttered to himself, but his ambition as a journalist drove him to continue. That afternoon, Elena, Mateo, and Javier met at Dona Rosa's house to plan their next move. Dona Rosa reluctantly handed over the ancient ritual book with instructions on how to break Isabella's bonds. Singing alone will not be enough, she said. You must offer something of value, something that binds you to this world. Only through sacrifice can the gates of Tlalocan be closed. Sacrifice? Mateo asked, his voice shaking with fear. What do you mean? Elena won't. Not a life. Dona Rosa cut him off, though her eyes were filled with doubt. It could be a memory, or love, or something that makes you whole. But Tlalocan will try to deceive you and take more than you offer. Elena stared at the pendant in her hand, feeling its strange warmth. I'm willing, she said, though her heart was pounding. But I need both of you. Mateo, I need your strength. Javier, I need your knowledge. Mateo nodded, though his face was filled with fear. Javier, feeling the weight of responsibility for Elena's wound, said, I'll make sure we finish this. We have until tomorrow night. That night, Elena dreamed about Isabella. In her dream, she stood at the Puente de las Lágrimas and watched as Isabella and Diego ran toward each other, only to be separated by Don Rafael's sword. Isabella turned to Elena, her eyes filled with tears. You are my hope, but he will test you, she whispered. Then the river below turned into a black sea and clawed hands dragged Elena into the darkness. Elena awoke screaming, her breathing difficult. The wound on her arm spread, black lines crawling like poisonous veins. Dona Rosa rushed in, brought holy water and began to pray, but Elena knew her time was running out. Tomorrow night, she said, her voice full of determination. We'll finish this. The next day, the 3 of them prepared. Dona Rosa gave Elena a wooden bracelet carved with protective symbols, while Mateo brought his guitar, hoping its music might calm the situation if things got worse. Javier carried a copy of the sacred song and a small blessed knife, though he wasn't sure what it was for. As they approached the Puente de las Lágrimas just before midnight, the full moon shone brightly, illuminating the ancient stones that seemed more alive than usual. Elena led the way, the pendant around her neck beginning to glow softly. She began to sing the sacred chant, her voice echoing through the suddenly heavy air. Isabella appeared, her figure clearer, her white dress fluttering like wings. "Continue," she whispered, her hand pointing to the center of the bridge. But before Elena could finish the first verse, the river below began to stir. Tlalocan appeared, this time not as a shadow but as a gigantic figure of black water, its face shifting like a terrifying mask. "Descendants of Cortes, give me your souls, or all will drown," he roared, his voice shaking the bridge. Javier, who was trying to record, suddenly felt his camera become hot and threw it to the ground. Mateo began to play the guitar, a soft but emotional ranchera melody, hoping it would calm the atmosphere. Strangely, the melody made Tlalocan hesitate for a moment, but not enough to stop him. Elena continued to sing, her pendant now glowing so brightly it hurt her eyes. She felt a strong pull from Tlalocan, as if an invisible hand was trying to snatch her soul. In the middle of her song, she heard a voice in her head, not Isabella's, but Tlalocan's. "Hand over the pendant. Release the bonds, and I will let you live." Elena was tempted. The wound on her arm felt like fire and her body grew weak. But she looked at Isabella, who was now standing beside her, her eyes filled with hope. "Don't listen," Isabella screamed in her mind. "Your sacrifice is for me, for San Miguel." With the last of her strength, Elena lifted the pendant and shouted the last verse of the song. The light from the pendant formed a great circle, enveloping the bridge, and for a moment Tlalocan screamed, his body beginning to crack. But at the same time, Elena felt something inside her tears, her childhood memories with Mateo, her laughter with Dona Rosa. Everything began to fade. Mateo, realizing what was happening, stopped the music and ran towards Elena. "Elena, stop. You don't have to do this," he shouted. But Elena shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "This is the only way," she whispered, and with her last breath, she pushed the pendant toward Isabella. Light erupted, enveloping the bridge in a white glow. Tlalocan roared, his body shattering into droplets of water, but the price Elena had paid remained unclear. As the light faded, Elena fell into Mateo's arms, her breath ragged. Isabella stood before them, her form now softly glowing, free of her veil. "Gracias," she whispered before disappearing like the morning dew. But the pendant in Elena's hand was now cracked, and the wound on her arm remained, a sign that Tlalocan might not be completely defeated. Frozen in place, Javier stared at the wreckage of his camera, realizing that he had lost his most important piece of evidence, but also realizing that this story was bigger than just an article. We did it, right?" he asked, his voice filled with doubt. Mateo, holding Elena tightly, didn't answer. He just stared at the river, which was now calm, but for some reason he felt that this story wasn't over yet.